Thank you. Members, does any have any questions on this? Councillor Rice.
I just wanted to say that at our last meeting, I had raised whether it was possible for members of this group to be involved in the discussion around the allocation of the funds for that scheme. And so it was opened up to this group, and then I attended a meeting. And so I just wanted to express my thanks for that, and to have been able to be involved in those discussions. And I support all of the schemes that were suggested and have been suggested. I did have a question regarding air pollution. I thought we had discussed, I can't remember what, we'd certainly discussed having an air, because we've got an air pollution officer, and whether there was funding. I thought some of the funding from this was going to support an air pollution officer work.
The air pollution officer I think you're referring to is one of our Sustrans officers. So the air pollution element is one strand of the work that she's doing. So yes, that work can continue. We have some air quality monitors, and we tend to do some monitoring around air quality in association with our school streets, all part of that. And we've just recently, or we're about to publish the secondary schools toolkit, which we part funded through the DEFRA Clean Air Grant.
If I may, just to add to that, it's the first line on page 7 of the pack. So the first line on page 7 of the pack is £160,000 to fund 2.5 full-time equivalent officers, and that is funding for that officer.
Maybe it would be worth just adding something in there, because it's a priority of the council, obviously, the air pollution monitoring. So it'd be useful to note that some of the funding is going to that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Anybody else have any suggestions, comments? Councillor Trent.
Yeah, I sort of look at the plan, because obviously the Recreation Road to Coy Pond improvements are of interest to me. And I kind of look at it, and it appears to be 2 additional crossings. The roads being used, or most of them, are quite quiet roads. And I'm wondering whether there will be any wriggle room to maybe improve that slightly by being able to feed in from the Herbert Avenue direction, as I think I suggested last time, where there is a desire to have part of what would ultimately be an alternative cycle route to Alder Road. And there's some fairly minor stuff needed in that, and with the fact that you've got a path that goes right through the middle of Branksome Rec, which, if it was used sensitively by cyclists, would actually link up with the Recreation Road route and would upgrade the usefulness of that quite significantly, and you'd get more bang for the buck, sort of thing, doing that. And I'm wondering whether that can be considered by because I'm assuming you're employing additional people to do that, whether that can actually be considered as part of it, because 2 pedestrian crossings or upgraded pedestrian crossings don't seem to be a lot for the sort of virtually £500,000 being sort of talked about. So I'm sort of wondering whether there's a chance of looking at some of the detail to try to get more bang for the spending.
Do you want to come in on that? Or?
Oh, do you want me to come in on that? Okay.
Please, yeah.
Yes, thank you for that. Yes, I do note your previous comments around the alternative routes coming down through Branksome Rec, and I have actually been in touch recently with our parks officers to see if whether there's anything we can do in terms of the access through the rec from the north. The route, as well as the crossing upgrades, there's also footway improvements for people that are walking or wheeling or with visual impairment, because some of the footways along that stretch are very, very substandard and not really accessible at all for those people. So we'll certainly be looking at that as well. And access to and from Branksome Rec in the north-south direction across Recreation Road. And I would also seek to assure you that whenever we're looking at projects, we always do try to see what other little bits and pieces we can incorporate to make as much, to get as much bang for our buck as we can on all our schemes.
Yeah, if I can come back on that, the bit that I was thinking of more than anything else is the one block to safely using that. And that is, there's an existing crossing across Herbert Avenue, and the other side you've got Northmere Road and various routes going towards Wallace down there. But there's this slope with steps, and it's not a very attractive or easy route for a cyclist. And I've had people suggest to me that they would like something done there, and it looks to me as if just that tiny area, it feeds into Central Avenue, feeds into the path across Branksome Rec, but it creates a feeder route onto that, which for what might possibly be a fairly modest sum, because the slope's there and everything, it just needs upgrading. It might actually sort of make the ultimate route that's being looked at a lot more attractive and usable, and it just kind of fits in the overall jigsaw of it. But it's that one little bit from Herbert Avenue down to Central Avenue that is the sticking point there. And I'm sort of hoping that that can be looked at, and if it can be bolted on with this scheme, it would make one hell of a difference. And then there are potentially other things in the future that you'd almost be creating another safe cycle route by the back door, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I do know the exact place you're talking about. I know this area quite well. That the slope that you talk about, it's one of those ones that on first appearance looks like it wouldn't cost much to do it. It'd be an easy win, and it's not quite as straightforward as that. Mainly because these days, especially with the funding, the external funding source, we have to design everything in accordance with current modern standards, and things like gradients. You have to be, they can't be too steep and all of that sort of thing if you're going to call it a cycle route or an accessible route. So it's not quite as straightforward as we might hope. That said, I am keen to try and do something there. And so whether it comes through this fund or something else, we do have it in mind, and we will look at whether or not there's some minor improvements we could make that would just make it a little bit easier for people. So yeah, we're always looking for ways to expand the network.
Thank you. Councillor Rice.
Just looking at the map, it says on Older Road at the crossing, proposed new crossing already funded for 2026 delivery. Does that mean it's using different funding for that crossing, or are we now using this funding and then that will release other funding?
Right, I have to try and explain this. It does get a bit complicated. So that crossing is actually being funded through ATF 5, Active Travel Fund 5, which was discussed previously. But there was an opportunity when the CAT fund came forward, and we knew we had that crossing upgrade on Yarmouth Road that we really wanted to do to link into the Koi Pond, the Bourne Valley Greenway. There was an opportunity to bring those two schemes together so that they can sort of mutually benefit each other, and then you can actually improve that route between the two as well. So the Older Road crossing is currently in the process of being designed. And then whatever we propose on that route from Branksome Rec through to Yarmouth Road, Koi Pond, will complement that scheme.
Thank you.
Okay. Anybody else? Put my microphone on. Thank you for that. The recommendation that's going to Cabinet is to delegation of the investment 1.459 million of the Consolidated Active Travel Fund to the Service Director for Planning and Transport in consultation with the portfolio holder for climate response, environment and energy. Are we happy with that as it stands? Thank you. Moving on to item 8, the Moorbus app smart card general update. I'll hand over to Richard.
Yes, Chair. So thank you. So what you might recall at the last meeting that we held, there was a debate, I think, following full council around the availability and the cost of certain child fares, and that there were only you could only access certain discounts through using the Moorbus app as opposed to some form of smart card. It was all about so off the back of that, the action from the previous meeting was to invite our enhanced bus partners, Moorbus, to this meeting so they could come forward and discuss that item. So very kindly, we have David Lecong and Richard Wade here from Moorbus that have come to give an update on the current state of buses around BCP and their business, but also to answer any questions that you and your group colleagues may have regarding the item.
Thank you and welcome. Thank you for coming along.
Okay, thank you. If I can introduce myself. So I'm David Lee Kong. I'm the Operations Director for Moorbus and the wider Go South Coast Group across the south of England. And I'm joined by Richard Wade, our Operations General Manager for Moorbus. Both Richard and I have worked here for quite some time now. Myself for 7 years and Richard, you've been here for
10 years next month.
So we know the area reasonably well. So in terms of a sort of general update, I thought I'd do a general update first and then we can come on to the subject of the smart cards and child ticketing and such like, and I'll be happy to answer any questions on that. So just bear with me 1 second. So as you probably are all aware, we're now the largest operator here in the conurbation, and we operate around 200 buses, both in and around the conurbation, and also into it from surrounding areas. We employ over 500 people locally in the Moorbus business, the majority of which are drivers. We also have engineers, support staff, cleaners, and so on. And then we have a further 40 colleagues at our head office, which is in Parkston Road, which covers the south of England as well. Since 2023, so 2022, as you know, I'll be aware, another operator left the area, and we were able to step in at short notice to continue the operation of the routes. We wanted to make sure that that was as seamless as possible for the travelling public, because we know from our experience that disruption to bus services and times without it causes people to seek alternatives and damages the sustainability in the long term. We were able to step in, stabilise things. We had to bring in older vehicles, but we've managed to invest in the fleet over the last couple of years. Since 2023, we've actually grown passenger numbers by 8%. That's partly with working in partnership with BCP Council and the officers on the schemes that we've been delivering to make bus travel a more attractive option for people and also a safer option for people as well. And that comes on the back of, if you like, so from 2023 onwards, we were still coming out of the COVID era. Things were stabilising. We're now in a much more stable period. But even so, the last 4 months, or the first 4 months of this year compared to 2024, our passenger numbers were up 0.5%, which is really good going. And our aim is to carry as many people as possible, as I'm sure you can appreciate. This good news was sort of verified, if you like, by our customers who participated in an independent transport focus survey last autumn across bus services in the BCP area, and we came out with just over 91% customer satisfaction, placing BCP in the top 3 towns, cities and counties in the country out of, I think, nearly 50 local authority areas. So that was really pleasing to see, and it verifies the hard work that we're all doing, both as an operator and as a local authority. I'll come on to addressing the sort of the ticketing side of things, if I may, then, and I'll give you a bit of background to begin with. So many of you may be aware that since 2011, or from 2011 up to a couple of years ago, we offered a smart card ticketing solution ourselves, which was called the Key, and people could buy a ticket, upload it onto that smart card, and then use that to travel. The technology that sits behind that is ITSO technology, and it's still used in places around the country. But that technology is nearly 25 years old now, and it was becoming increasingly unreliable to the point that the technology hadn't been updated by the people that operate it in the background. And we were having issues where passengers were buying tickets, trying to get them uploaded onto the smart card to then use on the bus, and it just wasn't happening. That causes disruption to passengers, it causes frustration, and we were getting significant complaints. At the same time, we launched our revised mobility app so that bus users can track their journey, plan their journey, and also buy tickets. And we do that with a local business here in Bournemouth called Passenger. They supply our app and do all the development work on it. And that made for a much better overall user experience, and has been very well received by our customers, giving it 4.8 out of 5 stars on the various app stores. Now, one of the issues that we'd also had, particularly here in Bournemouth, but around the conurbation and further afield, was, and particularly more so since COVID really, has been the abuse of certain tickets by people who are not entitled to travel on them, i.e. adult people claiming child discounts and such like. And obviously that is fraud, and that is revenue that we need to collect in order to make a viable service. So one of the benefits of the app to us as an operator is that we provide lower cost ticketing for children and young people, and they can verify on that app their age through a process that they go through, and that means that we've got more assurance that the people travelling with that app fit the criteria. Now, in the autumn of last year, and it's obviously got more momentum recently, is the wider society issue, I suppose you could call it, of smartphones in schools, and certain schools' desire to potentially remove them, which we understand, and we understand it's a sensitive matter, and different people have different opinions on that. At the moment, we do offer alternatives, but they are a little bit more expensive because they're more expensive to give. What we have been doing since we were alerted to this is trying to find a long-term sustainable solution to the challenge, if you like, of trying to verify and prove that somebody is entitled to that younger person's discount. We want to give them confidence to travel, and we don't want to have a situation where we've got conflict on the platform of the bus between the passenger and the driver. So to that end, and again with the support and working with colleagues from BCP Council, my team had a meeting with Smart Card Applications Management, which is a potential solution whereby the person's contactless bank card, the young person's contactless bank card, can be uploaded with a ticket in the same way that the old smart card technology did, but this is sort of the next generation, if you like, and it uses a card that they're already likely to have. There are a couple of teething issues, which means it's not quite ready for adoption. Namely, the biggest issue that we've got is that it doesn't highlight to a driver when scanned that the passenger is travelling on a younger person's ticket. And our concern is that somebody may therefore try and obtain these and then use them, and not that's an adult not be entitled to do so. We don't want to put anything where we're putting people at risk. So there's a few challenges on that, but it is something that we are wanting to work through to see if that can be a solution, because we think that's probably the best show in town to try and solve this problem for the long term. I think that's about it from me before I open up to any questions in that sense. But Richard, do you want to add anything?
Yeah, just really, I was part of the team that discussed with the smart card application management, and as David said, we've kind of left it with them that we need to have a differentiation between an adult using a bank card and someone entitled to the child fare using it. So that's something that will be a sort of nationwide problem that would need to be resolved. And I think perhaps it's just worth adding that fraud really is a problem for us. We do really genuinely get a lot of people who will get their child to obtain the ticket using the relevant verification, and then it will get sold on to adults who use and abuse them. So that's the reason that we need to get this right, but we are keen to do so, and it's just how quickly we can do that. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Trent.
Yeah, is there a way of adapting the same sort of systems that we have in the concessionary bus fare for people knocking on a bit like me, which you have to renew every now and then, and there's a limit on, or you can put a limit on how long it lasts? Because if you issued a photo ID card to a young person that expires on their 16th or 18th birthday or whatever age is determined it applies up to, then that would be self-policing anyway. The card wouldn't work. And, you know, if someone says, well, you don't look like a kid sort of thing, and they look at it and you don't match the photograph, that might make it less available to fraud, but it would be using an existing system and technology which seems to work quite well. I'm not aware, although I might be corrected, that you know, sort of you have issues with sort of pensioners or people using pensioners passes to sort of get a free ride, so to speak. I don't know whether there are problems there, but it seems to me it's something that exists that can be sort of adapted to apply at the other end of the scale.
Would you like to comment on that?
Yeah, well, as it happens, it was actually the same technology that sits behind it. So if you remember, I said about ITSO, and it stands for something, and I can't remember off the top of my head what it stands for, but it's integrated smart card technology, effectively. So if you have got a concessionary pass and you look on the back of it, there'll be a little blue ITSO logo, and that's the sort of architecture, if you like, that sits behind it at a national level to enable smart card transactions for concessionary passes, but it also enabled operators at the time to go down the road of smart cards for commercial passengers. I think the issue remains that technology, whilst it's generally okay for concessions, we have been having issues. There are times when that falls down as well. Not very often, to be fair, but there are times when that can fall down, particularly when smart cards get updated and get renewed for older people and those entitled. But I think the main issue remains that it would then become a very bureaucratic and costly process as well that we need to factor in. I'm not ruling it out, but we want to try and see if there are other options first.
Thank you. Councillor Farr.
With the issue of fraud, I just sort of wondered if when so someone's got on the bus and they pay using the app, isn't there something that pops up and it tells them that to the bus driver it's an adult one or a child one, so they can say, well, actually you look too old or whatever. Thanks.
Yeah, absolutely. So the mobile app will make a different noise and it will give a different message on the screen to say what that is. Kind of where we're at with the bank card or credit card, Monzo card, whatever it may be, is that at the moment, if I put my card in my hand and pop it on that machine, it'll make the same noise no matter what kind of card it is. Essentially, at the point that card is presented to the machine, it is simply saying that card owes me some money. That night, the organisation that sits behind that sort of does the banking between our ticket machines and ourselves will then say that card needs to pay a single fare, or that card needs to pay now for the difference to a weekly fare, or whatever it may be, and charge accordingly. What we would be developing is a system where that card was now registered to a young person, so that it was charging child fare. But what we need is for it, at the point it was presented to the machine, to differentiate to the driver. Now, I'm certainly no expert in IT, but I would have thought that there will be some means of, once that card's been presented for the first time, that in the future it can then be be identified as the card that's been registered to a young person, and that's kind of the challenge that we've set to the smart card application management team, working with the ticket machine manufacturers on whatever they need to do. But I think you're absolutely right. That is where we want to end up. It just doesn't quite work that way now for cards. Thank you.
People working on it are satisfied that they will come to a solution, or?
So where they've got to at the moment is that they can certainly make it work from the perspective of charging the child or the young person the reduced fare. They haven't confirmed yet whether they can get it to identify itself differently to the driver at the point of presenting. In fairness, I'm looking colleagues to my right, I think it was the end of March, beginning of April, we met with them.
In March, yeah.
In March, so they've had, you know, a relatively short number of weeks to look at that, but we'll be looking for an update in the very near future.
Councillor Rice.
I'd like to understand a little bit more about the extent of the fraud. For me, buses are very expensive to use, especially compared with driving or cycling. Obviously, driving is very subsidised, and we don't subsidise the buses very much. So I'm just wondering, sort of, well, and also for me, is it really a big problem, the fraud? Like, in terms of if these are people that have got high cost of living elsewhere due to a variety of other factors, is like, do we want them to be using the bus? It's better to be using the buses than not using the buses, and it's better for children to have access to this card than to prioritise reducing fraud. What I'm saying is that the balance between increasing ridership, for me, overrides the risk of fraud to a certain extent. So I just wanted to have a bit of a discussion around that.
I think in terms of the scale of it, I haven't got any quantifiable numbers to say, you know, X percentage of our revenue is at risk to fraud. We haven't got it in that sense. What we have got are examples, and numerous examples, of where we've had cases of fraud. I think the issue here is that the people that are the biggest committers of this fraud are not necessarily the people who you've identified in that sense that are at the most risk, that you know, cost of living crisis is really hitting. We've had people with which is basically organised crime, getting hold of bank cards that had no value and using them on our buses, consistently buying tickets and high value tickets. One of the reasons behind why we've made the decision we have done. So it's, you know, there will be people that will try and, you know, take advantage. Wherever you have a cut-off, an age cut-off or any kind of boundary or something, there will always be people at the edges that will try and take advantage of that, and we understand that. And we're not saying we're trying to get every single penny here, but there's a balance to be had, and we're trying to make sure that we're being fair to everybody. We try our best to keep fares as low as possible, and you know, everything's relative. But obviously, one of our biggest costs has been labour costs, and our wages have gone up significantly. Plus, obviously, we've got the national insurance increases come in. There are a whole raft of things that mean we've got to try and keep things balanced and provide that service. And we think our aim is that if everyone pays proportionally what they should, then we can do that and keep fares low for everybody. But it's about having those protection methods, and particularly as different payment types have come in, there's always been some degree of fraud. That's why, you know, many years ago you would have the revenue inspectors that would have got on and checked all the tickets. It's become much more sophisticated nowadays in that sense. Richard, I don't know if you've got anything to add on that.
I think all I'd probably add is that one of the things that the Enhanced Partnership has been doing is looking at reduced child fares. So, for example, we've got a £2 child day rider available at weekends coming in from the 24th of this month, because that differentiation between that child fare, which is aimed at addressing those families with cost of living issues, and the adult fare, because that gap is getting wider. It's more of a temptation for people, I guess, to commit fraud is perhaps something we've just got to identify and be aware of. That's probably all I've got to add.
Thank you. You mentioned £2 children fare. Did you say weekends or?
Yes, there'll be a child day rider available on Saturdays and Sundays. It's valid for unlimited travel within the BCP area, within our fare zone A, which is the BCP area plus Upton. And that's coming in from the 24th of May. What we've actually done is we have introduced that as a paper ticket as well as on the app in sort of reaction to the comments that were made at this last meeting.
Is that available? Will that be available in school holidays as well, or is that just weekends? Is that?
It will be available at weekends in school holidays. There has been some discussion about whether it could also be extended to school holiday weekdays. That's something, it is being funded through the BCP, so it's something, the discussions are ongoing, and may come as a surprise to my colleagues to my right, because I've not replied to the email yet, but I've actually got a price for what we think that would cost now, that I'll be sharing this week for the next discussion. You know, hopefully in time to consider for July whether it's available to introduce or not.
Okay. Thank you. Councillor Rice.
Just on the £2 ticker, if we were able to get funding from the government for children to travel during weekdays for £2 as well, would you have capacity on the buses to accommodate that? Because we're aiming for 50% of all journeys to be moved to active travel and buses. So we need a huge shift in the amount of people travelling. It's great to start off with kids so that then they develop a lifelong habit. You know?
Absolutely, and there are some parts of our network that could cope with that easily, and there are other parts that are already struggling. We replaced the fleet of buses on the M1 and M2 in late 2023 and early 2024. We went from single decks that we'd had for 19 years to double decks, specifically to give us that step change of capacity on those routes. It's something that, and David's more involved with our fleet investment than me, but we are, as a proportion, buying more and more double decks and fewer single decks across the business, because we recognise that there are going to be those pinch points, particularly at those peak times when all school children are travelling. That is definitely a point to consider.
Brian, just add to that. I mean, we'd be happy to explore that, and as you say, change that behavioural pattern early in people's lives to make them confident and users is what we're all about, and we'll do everything we can to support that. The practicality of it is such that, you know, we can always upgrade routes, providing there's no space constraints. We can upgrade routes to double deck relatively easily. The bigger challenge is if significant proportions all came all at once, our ability to adapt to that would be a challenge. And of course, because you've got, for us, the most expensive time to operate buses is in the peak periods in the morning and the afternoon, because that's when we have all our buses out at the same time. The way of keeping that cost down would be, you know, if schools actually have more of a staggered start and finish time, you can use the same vehicle more than once and spread the loads out, and therefore keep the cost down. So there's two ways of dealing with that particular challenge, but it's more than just what we can do as a transport provider and maybe you as a local authority. It needs the schools and the colleges to come on board with that as well.
Thank you. Councillor Farr.
Changing the topic slightly, if I may, but while we've got you here, I want to make the most of you. I think you did a great job taking over the routes, and the yellow buses went out of business. I know some people still miss the colour of the buses. The yellow was pop and everything, but you did a good job. There wasn't much of it. I don't think there was any. I was going to say there wasn't much of a gap. I don't think there was any gap thinking back for the area that I represent with Kinston, West Howe, with the 5 and 5A. However, I think before they went out of business, there was the 4A route, which was popular. But I think with yellows, they did sort of swap and change things a bit, and then there was obviously COVID, so that route was lost. So we've lost that link with Northbourne and sort of Bearwood as well, linking up with Kinston. And it used to be good. It was a quick route straight down the Wimborne Road. Is there any possibility that could come back in some way? Thanks.
I'll hand over to Richard in a second, but I think in broad terms, what we try to do is have that stable network and a network that's that is sustainable as well. So stable and sustainable. We were very careful not to try and change too much too soon with what we did. And we've got our first sort of changes to network actually in your ward coming up in the 24th, and that's all about trying to provide quicker journey times for people and also increase connections. And Richard can talk a little bit more about that shortly. There are some, with the network and the complexity of having 3 towns joined up, there are always going to be some challenges at the edges of where people want to go within that. And we want to try and make sure that if we do put those links on, that we can do so sustainably, and we're not coming to BCP Council asking for money to keep them going and such like. It is on our agenda that it's something we want to try and look at the affordability of that. But we haven't got any immediate plans just yet, just to manage that expectation. There are a couple of other areas around the conurbation as well, and particularly the airport gets a lot of mention in terms of where people want to go to, but there are challenges with that. But Richard, do you want to just talk a little bit about those?
I think it's perhaps just worth saying, Councillor Farr, that the new 11 service that we're introducing from the 24th of May will certainly provide a quicker link between Bournemouth, Winton and Kinson, and that will extend to Bearwood. So that will perhaps give 1 or 2 additional options, but not quite going the whole way to replacing that 4A service. But I totally echo what David said, that what we don't want to do is get ourselves into a position where every time we change the timetable, we're changing routes as well, because it'll create confusion and instability, and understanding what those issues are is the most important thing. But it's certainly good to listen and get the views of your constituents on what will be useful for the future developments. Thank you.
Any further questions or comments? Or no, Councillor Hadley.
Thank you very much for responding to our challenge, really, in terms of the smartphones. It was something that was raised in full council as being a real worry, and obviously some of the school teachers who are also councillors had direct experience of it. I just wondered, in terms of the use of smart cards rather than apps, does that cover the sorts of cards that children will have, which sometimes are cash on card rather than being a full debit card or obviously a credit card? Are we confident that we're going to meet the needs of the sorts of cards that are going to be in kids' hands?
Yeah, I think we're pretty confident that in terms of banking, if you think about them as banking cards, so whether they're credit or debit or the type of banking cards, we are relatively confident, I think, that will capture the majority. And obviously, as society moves slowly or fast, depending on your outlook, towards more of a cashless society, that's going to be more prevalent. I think if we can capture 80%, 90% of children travelling, young people, but particularly the lower ages, with that system, then we can take a view as to, well, who's left that's not caught by this, and is there anything we can do for those?
If I may, Chair. So in terms of the age verification, is that using the bank? Obviously knows the age of their card holder. Is it via the bank, or is it a registration that would be with yourselves?
Yeah, it would be a registration that was organised by when we say ourselves, by the public transport sector, if you like, and it would use that child's birthday. It could even be, I mean, just to highlight the difference, we allow people to purchase child fares up till the day before their 19th birthday, and that's actually quite high in terms of what bus operators around the country do. So what Smart Card Applications Management have told us is that actually the card will be clever enough to say, well, this person's presented me on a bus in Bournemouth, Christchurch and Poole. I can sell this 18-year-old a child ticket, but then when they go on holiday to another part of the country, it will charge them the adult fare. It's got that capability.
I have a question from Councillor Northover, who's online, asking about whether Henry or Hyperjar cards, I guess they're banking cards like any other, so they would be.
Yeah, we can't think of any reason why not. I'm not familiar with those names myself, but I think David might be.
I think on the basis of those questions, because there are neither Richard or I are parents, so we are not that familiar with some of the things that were with younger people at the moment. What we will do as part of our next discussion with them is get a full list of the different cards that are accepted, just to make sure that we've not got anything falling between the gaps.
I've got Councillor North Overhead. Do you want to ask your question, Councillor?
Oh, yes, please. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Yes, we can.
Oh, good. Yeah, the sort of cards, it's where you prepay as a parent. So they're not actually really belonging to the child, or the child wouldn't have gone through any sort of ID process. I use them as a foster carer, so that I can give the child a card who has got no ID or anything like that, and then they can go into shops and use the card. But they do actually quite often have problems on the bus, I've noticed before. But for those kids, that's the only sort of thing they can actually have so it's a prepaid. It's just called a prepaid card, and they're called Go Henry, and there's one called Hyperjar. So it's not really a bank; it's just a prepaid card. I can send something in by email if you want, if that's useful.
I think that explanation's useful in itself, because you've now reminded me about Go Henry. So yeah, in how you've described it, if both of those types of cards, that would present a challenge, we would need to look at how we overcome that challenge as part of the process. Ultimately, somewhere along the lines, there needs to be a verification process, and what we end up going to needs to be such that the people who get the benefit from it can get the benefit from it, but we don't open ourselves up to a new area where people are taking advantage of it that they're not entitled to. So it sounds like there's a little bit more thinking that needs to be done on that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anything further? No. Well, thank you both very much.
Not from me.
Thank you for coming along and answering our questions and letting us know about. And of course, you'll keep us informed through the officers. Thank you. Moving on to item 9, the traffic regulation orders. The bus service improvement plan. I'll hand over to you again, Richard.
Yeah, that's fine. So just for the benefit of the group here today, obviously the council has an enhanced bus partnership, and we have a bus service improvement plan. We've been out to consult on a number of changes along some of the routes, and I've got officers here today to present a bit more on the bus service improvement plan and talk about the consultation outputs, so we can form a recommendation to Cabinet via the group. So I'll hand over to John McVeigh, who's our Sustainable Transport Policy Manager, and we've also got Kevin Brolin sat next to him as well, who's a Senior Traffic Officer.
Thank you, Chairman. If I could, by way of introduction to both of the bus service improvement plan items A and B in the agenda, provide a little background before asking, as Richard says, our Senior Transport Officer, Kevin Brolin, to summarise the schemes, the outcome of the public consultation, and the recommendations, including any adjustments to the original proposals in light of the consultation. So in 2021, the government published its National Bus Strategy for England. They called it Bus Back Better. And this strategy set out an ambitious vision and comprehensive approach to transform the quality of bus services across the country. There was an expectation that, depending on the local circumstances, all local transport authorities should either pursue franchising or commit to implementing a statutory enhanced partnership, or EP, with the bus operators. Now, BCP Council and its predecessor authorities already had a strong voluntary partnership working arrangement with the bus operators. So the statutory EP route was the obvious one to take. A further requirement was to jointly develop a bus service improvement plan, that's the BCIP, setting out the vision, objectives and delivery plans of the local transport authority and its partners at the local level in accordance with the aims of the National Bus Strategy. So our BCIP aligns with the corporate strategy and the 2022 council motion to get 50% of journeys within the BCP area to be done by walking, scooting, cycling or public transport by 2030, and that's in support of the council's climate and ecological emergency declaration back in 2019. So the BCIP was also a funding requirement, and BCP Council was one of only 31 local transport authorities in England to be awarded funding as part of the first phase of BCIP. So the BCIP sets out the aims to make buses more frequent, faster, more reliable and easier to use. And bus speed impacts the overall journey time for passengers as well as the costs of operation for the bus operators. Higher bus speeds leading to faster and more reliable journeys has been identified as one of the most important factors to encourage bus travel. Other road users, of course, also benefit if people switch to using the bus, as a double-decker can carry, well, over 74 passengers, which, is a lot of car loads that would otherwise be potentially adding to the traffic congestion. So the speed of buses is impacted by traffic congestion and also how our limited road space is used, and even minor adjustments such as relocating some of the car parking can make a big difference to the flow of traffic on a road. So the BCIP sets out a number of bus priority schemes aimed to speed up buses, including the Folkestone, Southbourne and the Purewell schemes. And I'll hand over to Kevin to my right to talk about those in more detail.
Thank you, John, and thank you, councillors. Yes, the section between Folkestone and Southbourne was highlighted as an area where services regularly suffer disruption and was submitted as an area to improve as a bus priority scheme. The section of bus network sees 5 core bus services, providing buses up to every 3 minutes, as well as a number of school services, equating to around 93,000 journeys per year along the corridor. This section between Folkestone Station and Carberry Avenue, which we're looking at, is scheduled to take around 5 minutes, but our analysis of bus open data shows some journeys taking in excess of over 20 minutes to achieve this journey. And average journey times have seen an increase in the last year compared to the year previous. As John mentioned, there are a number of implications on the operator, including increasing costs. There's also reduced confidence in using these services, and there's also implications on the operator to operate timely services as set out by the Traffic Commissioner. The proposals look to remove some sections of parking at particular points along the scheme extent where congestion occurs and provide replacement parking on adjacent side roads, as well as this will improve traffic flow, which will be of benefit for not only buses but all road users, and it will reduce obstructions that add difficulty to those that also cycle along this route. Consultation was launched on 10th of January 2025, running through until 31st of January 2025, with enhanced promotion of this consultation through localised leafleting, with a total of 2,000 leaflets distributed to local residents and businesses. A total of 196 respondents gave comment to this consultation, with 59 in support, 110 in objection and 27 in general comment. Those in support felt the proposals improve efficiency and reliability in public transport, encouraging further bus use. Those in objection outlined reduced parking opportunity for residents, those accessing local businesses and parents of children at nearby schools. They also mentioned that the needs of local businesses and residents outweigh the need to improve bus service reliability, of which minimal benefit would be achieved if the proposals were implemented. The consultation responses have been reviewed, sorry, and minor amendments to the scheme in line with these have been made and are illustrated in Appendix A. I will just share quickly the slides, but just focus on what we are recommending. Just give a second. So I won't run through these quite quickly because you have all you should have seen these in Appendix A. I'm just going through the key sections here. So it's first section between 41 and 51 Seabourne Road sees a reduction in the size of a parking section on Seabourne Road, with replacement parking being provided on nearby Stowvale Road. Similarly, on the section between 55 and 63 Seabourne Road, sees a reduction in parking on a section of Seabourne Road, with additional parking provided on Harcourt Road, facilitated by removal of bollards which are surplus to requirement. The junction of Harcourt Road is also enhanced with a no waiting and no loading at any time restriction in order to improve line of sight for vehicles that are exiting onto Seabourne Road. Further down the section between 65 and 79 Seabourne Road is located by a former greengrocer warehouse and a convenience store opposite. The proposal here is to remove a section of parking to provide pass in place for buses, whilst also increasing the current provision of loading bay to support these local businesses. Alternative parking is established on Cromwell Road. The section between 83 and 111 on Seabourne Road sees a minor reduction in the bay length to improve the line of sight at the junction of Norwood Place, and additional provision of loading bay to further support the aforementioned local businesses. The remaining parking section does not impact on the traffic flow, thanks to the increased road width here, and so is retained. Moving further down to section 2 between 175 and 182 Seabourne Road. This section is the narrowest along the corridor, and with nearby junctions and crossings is where a lot of congestion occurs. The proposals therefore relate to the removal of section of parking here and redistributing spaces on nearby side roads, including providing additional parking spaces on Woodside Road. The proposal to amend the existing taxi bay on Parkerwood Road to allow daytime loading, also to support the local businesses. Further up in section 3, it's between 111 and 117 on Southbourne Grove. For this section, we propose a small reduction in the parking section at the junction of Pine Avenue to assist buses turning out of Southbourne Road, as often vehicles obstruct the front end swing of the buses, resulting in buses getting stuck. All other parking along Southbourne Grove up to this point is retained and unaltered. Finally, on section 4 is outside Carberry Row, and the current configuration of the parking along here means it is difficult for buses to correctly serve the stop. This causes difficulty for elderly and disabled users in boarding and alighting, as well as causing unnecessary congestion as buses cannot correctly pull into this stop. The proposals see a reconfiguration of the parking and bus stop clearway to improve access for buses to safely align with the curbside edge. We are therefore here today to seek a recommendation by the group that the scheme outlined is delivered as proposed. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Members, any questions on this? Councillor Farr?
Yeah, I note that there was, with the respondents, there's 59 who were for and 110 against. So that's quite a big number that were against, or not far off double the amount that were against. What is this business? Is this going to affect the businesses? Is this a concern? Because sometimes this is a concern when there's change people don't want change out, they're concerned it's going to affect them negatively. It might not, but obviously people are concerned when there is change which is proposed. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you very much, Councillor. Yes, in the consultation, the responses that you highlight there, that there was objection from residents that did highlight concerns about impact on businesses and residents' addresses. I will refer to there's a report that was published in 2018 called the Pedestrian Pound, and this actually highlighted the fact that those that actually travel to businesses through other modes of transport as opposed to the private car actually increase their spend on local businesses to as much as £32 per return journey. There is also some reference in the report there that some businesses do they do inflate the necessity for private car use for their businesses, for actually public transport and other sustainable travel modes equally contribute to their business growth.
No other question? Oh, Councillor Canavan.
I'm Patrick Canavan, a councillor in Boscombe. I drive down that road a lot. Anything you can do to remove the parking would be a definite bonus on that road. I think one of the reasons for the number of objections that you've had is that there is immense pressure on those side roads in terms of parking. And I think I could understand residents being concerned about potentially even more parking on already congested side roads. So I'm really just wondering whether, or what might be possible to do in order to try and ease the congestion on some of the side roads, because I know from experience now it's actually impossible to park on some of those roads now because of the amount of cars parked there already. Potentially this could exacerbate that. So I'm just wondering whether there is any capacity anywhere to try and ease that situation.
I can take this one, yeah. I'm Andrew Brown, traffic team leader. I've just come and added a bit extra from what Kevin said, is that you'll notice Appendix B, which is the outcomes, consultation outcome and recommendations. It's actually split down into elements of the scheme, so that we have, through Kevin's work and what he's just presented, we have considered those slight amendments following looking at the detailed sections and different elements of the scheme, because there was different responses from one end of the scheme to the other. In response to your question about further things, obviously within the traffic team we take quite a number of requests to look at traffic regulation orders, look at issues, look at congestion and parking matters. So obviously we could take those forward in the future if ward councillors wanted to come forward to us. We regularly meet ward councillors in this area, specifically around Southbourne and through to Boscombe, so we'd happily talk in the future. But in terms of this scheme, obviously we can't add on extra things, but we have taken account of that with the Appendix B, which shows some slight nuances, and as Kevin's just presented.
Councillor Hadley.
Thank you. Yes, I was struck by what Councillor Caravan just said at the start there, in terms because it was raised at the very beginning that this 5-minute journey could be 20 minutes for the bus, and for anything that's sitting behind it. And so it's not just a benefit to the buses; it's just a benefit to movement to anybody through that area. There are clearly people who value the parking outside their properties, but it's not just about the buses getting through. It's also about the buses getting to the stop to be able to pick up pedestrians with passengers with limited mobility. If they can't get right up to the stop, then someone with a wheelchair or a pushchair can't easily get on board. So it's about supporting people with disabilities or with small children, and also keeping the general traffic moving as well.
Thank you. Councillor Trent.
Yeah, I have some sympathy with those who haven't got room to put in off-road parking and haven't got rear access, and one of the things, and I've got to make inquiries elsewhere on who handles residents' parking schemes now, because sometimes that actually does solve a problem, and you get the people parking who need to park rather than anyone who thinks, oh, I'm working around the corner, I'll go and park there, sort of thing. And so I have got some sympathy with what Councillor Canavan is saying with regard to that. And I noticed on one of these shots that there were a group of houses that were fronting that would, be parking to access their property, or it could be carers picking them up if they're elderly and things like that. And I think the illustration was, I think round the corner Harcourt Road was pretty well parked. And if you add those extra few people onto Harcourt Road, you do make the problem worse. So though I can understand where the bus company's coming from, and this wasn't the one that caused me greatest concern, but I did look at another one which I thought was coming up earlier this year. I do wonder whether perhaps we need to look a little bit broader at where we're moving people to, and perhaps consider offering a resident parking scheme or something, so that those who need to park somewhere near the house, and you don't want to park, half a mile away, sort of thing, actually get priority parking in their street. I had a situation in Wallace Sound which, caused people to start putting their bins in the road and blocking traffic and stuff like that. And that was resolved by the residents' parking scheme, and nobody's come back and said, oh, take it out, because it seems to work. There's a balance that's been struck. And I'm wondering whether that is something perhaps missing from this equation that perhaps we can help people and their ward councillors to achieve, because, I understand where people come from, but I understand the needs to reduce congestion, and, I do feel that we need to find a way of balancing it out somehow.
Councillor Herrick, did you want to come in on the parking bay, on the resident parking area?
So as portfolio holder for all things parking, I can kind of, you've struck on the perennial balance of parking, is that obviously we've got businesses that are asking for parking outside, we've got residents that would like to be able to park near to their homes, and obviously we've got a network of traffic in terms of bus, in terms of cars, bikes, people on foot to be able to get around, and balancing all of those is tricky. In terms of residents' parking schemes, the parking team are currently doing a full review of all the permits that we have out there, the first since BCP's existence. They'll be coming forward later in the year. But I will say that we're open to residents' parking schemes in the future after that review's taken place. But as I say to everyone that asks for these, what you have to pay for those. And what you're paying for then is not for you to park outside your house, but for other people to not be able to. And that's the balance that you've got. You might find that the businesses along there would object to significant residents parking on that ground, or that there's a better balance to be found. But I think that the team are available to do that, but obviously that's a capacity issue and one into the future.
Thank you. Councillor Rice.
I just wanted to express my support for improving the bus services, and to just check that I haven't been able to look at all of the adjusted recommendations in detail, but I just want to ensure that you're not compromising the bus reliability and reinstalling parking that you had initially thought would be best to be removed. So I just wanted to emphasise to prioritise the buses. Also, I felt it was useful to raise one of the learning points from the transport conference regarding 1 hour parking. I've just seen there's a lot of 1 hour parking and no return. And there was a learning point for me was that if there's a limit on the parking, then people won't stay in shops and cafes. They will be they will aim to get back for whenever their parking runs out, and that has a significant impact on businesses. And so I'm just noting the benefit of arriving by bus and then just being able to stay as long as you want is, I imagine, hugely beneficial for businesses. So getting more people onto buses in this area just sounds win-win. Thank you.
On this
Oh,
one, sorry.
just one other comment. In your presentation, I just noticed that it would be useful to also highlight about reliability of journey time. So it's not always about speed. If a journey takes 5 minutes or 5 minutes rather than 4 minutes, but is always 5 minutes, then actually that will really, that's what customers really need, is that reliability.
I would say through the analysis of the consultation results, we've struck a good balance and still have the good ethos of the scheme to improve bus reliability. So there's just a few tweaks here and there, but it's nothing major. Some of the key points that Kevin noted, on the narrow section, obviously we're removing all the parking along that section, and that was one of the key points that Moorbus had for us as well. And also as well to note that there are 2 underutilised car parks in the area, one on Woodside Road and one close to Folkestone Station. And through just local knowledge and speaking to the parking team, they're underutilised at the moment. So it's perhaps encouragement as well to ensure that people use those car parks.
I'll just come back on your points as well, Councillor. Thank you very much for those. The great thing with this scheme is that we've worked very closely with our local bus operators, part of our enhanced bus partnership, and we've done a lot of engagement with them to sort of talk about what our plans are, and we've also involved the local board members for their views on this as well. And where we've made adjustments following the consultation, we've gone back to Moorbus to review these, and they've shown their support as well. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Let's move on to the next one. Yeah, you've got a recommendation. Do just find it. Is it just, that's the only one we're looking at? Yeah, for this one. Yeah, okay. So the recommendation is that for Cabinet is that we recommend the scheme to Cabinet as it is. Are we happy with that recommendation? Yeah. Thank you. Keep doing that. Yes, please.
So the next item, as introduced by John, so John obviously said he was going to cover, him and Kevin would cover 2 items. So the first item was the BCP proposals throughout Folkestone and Southbourne, and the next item is about the BCP programme in Purewell. So there we go. Over to Kevin again.
Thank you, Richard, and thank you, councillors. Yeah, as with the Folkestone and Southbourne scheme, Purewell scheme was also highlighted as an area suffering congestion by bus services and was submitted as an area for bus priority scheme. Purewell sees 5 core bus services providing 9 buses an hour, as well as a school bus service and a seasonal open top service. In total, over 46,000 journeys operate per year along this corridor. The journey is scheduled to take around 3 minutes, but can take in some cases over 14 minutes. And as mentioned, this has significant impact on passengers that are reliant on these services, as well as increasing costs to operators and reducing confidence in these services running. To summarise the proposals, we're looking to remove some sections of parking at particular points along the scheme where traffic becomes congested to enable to open up the road and improve the flow of traffic. This will also be of benefit to all road users and will also reduce the number of obstructions that add difficulty for those that cycle along the route. Where on-street parking is considered for its removal, it is replaced with no waiting restrictions. Along with the existing parking restrictions, these are enforced on Monday to Saturday daytime only, with no restrictions in the evenings or any restrictions on Sundays, allowing for residents to still utilise this space for evening and overnight parking, as congestion is low and therefore buses are minimally impacted at these times. The consultation was launched at the same time on 10th of January 2025, running to the 31st of January 2025. Consultation promoted through localised leafleting, with a total of 1,000 leaflets distributed to local residents and businesses. A total of 201 responses to the consultation were received, with 20 in support, 181 in objection. Additionally, a petition with over 900 signatures objecting to the proposals was received. Those in support agreed that proposals improve efficiency and reliability in public transport, encouraging further bus use, as well as reducing congestion for all road users. Those in objection outlined reduced parking opportunities for residents, those accessing local businesses, and to the local church. They also pointed towards the improved traffic flow, leading to increased vehicle speeds and other road safety concerns. The consultation responses have been reviewed and amendments to the scheme have been made in line with these responses, and I'll just share again quickly. Quickly. So the proposals see a removal of a parking base situated outside St Joseph's Church to provide a passing place for traffic large enough to accommodate the buses. The parking section is replaced by a no waiting restriction enforced in the daytime. The section can still be used for parking in the evenings and on Sundays. Apologies. And then further down, near the junction with the Buttery, the proposal sees removal of parking sections to create a passing place for two-way traffic, replaced by a no waiting restriction enforced in the daytime. This section can still be used for parking in the evenings and on Sundays. We're therefore here today to seek a recommendation by the group to re-engage with the impacted ward members, Christchurch Town Council and the community on the revised scheme as outlined in Appendix A, prior to advertising by way of traffic regulation order for future consideration. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Trent.
Right, so this is the one I looked at following some of the comments made, and I was the thing that struck me about this was a classic example of where the residents that are affected, and I know there's a business affected as well, but the residents that are affected have absolutely no off-road parking, no rear access. There isn't a nearby side road, and that I see as a problem. There is not that far away a public car park, and going really back to the resident parking idea, you know, sort of that could almost be incorporated into a resident parking scheme. But the one section of this I did find very, very difficult to think. And to be fair, it was a Sunday, so there were obviously less buses using it. But it struck me as if, you know, there are lots of areas like this, and just past it is an area where it's one-way traffic anyway, you know, and sort of traffic lights to get across the bridge and so on. So it does concern me, and you know, I think you know, we need to think about that, and if some of the modifications actually are aimed at helping the people who frontage along that, you know, because there's basically a terrace of houses, then that will improve things a bit, because obviously not everyone's parking all the time. But you know, I do think this needs to be seriously thought through.
Councillor Canavan.
Can I just follow Councillor Trent's question up, because I think he raises an important point. I wasn't clear, and I may have misread this, but just in terms of the process, would it be possible to seek the views of Christchurch Town Council before? Have I got this the wrong way round in terms of at what stage in, you know, given the amendments that you've made, adjustments that you made in response to the consultation, would it be the intention to go back to Christchurch Town Council again before it goes to Cabinet? Sorry, does that make any sense?
Councillor Richards, come in on that one.
Thank you, Councillor. Yes, from the initial recommendations, we engaged with Christchurch Town Council in the original development of the proposals, and indeed they were a respondent in the consultation to which they objected to the plans. The intention would be to re-engage with Christchurch Town Council and their planning committee on the adjusted recommendations as well.
Yeah, so just to address your point, both of these BCP schemes went out to public engagement. They were both advertised with processes for traffic regulation orders, so they could proceed straight onto cabinet if they were supported. In the instance of obviously the Folkestone and Southbourne, the recommendation is still going to go on to cabinet so that it can be considered and obviously debated at cabinet and potentially approved. In the instance of Purewell, the decision, the recommendation from the officers is not to carry on to cabinet, to actually take a step backwards and then re-engage, as you've discussed with the ward councillors, albeit, as Kevin says, they were initially engaged with the initial proposal as well. Is that okay? No, I don't think it was that clear, and it's not. It's a complex process. So.
Councillor Hadley.
Yeah, thank you. I think just to make a general point, really, that effectively, if in the instance that we looked at for Southbourne, there are some slight tweaks to decrease the measures that we put in place. In the instance of Purewell, it's potentially a significantly changed scheme, and therefore we have to go back to consult before we go to the TRO. So the general principle is, if we're just reducing the scheme a little bit, we can go forward with the TROs as planned. But if we plan to change it significantly, then good practice would suggest we go out and consult again, and that's what's being recommended to.
And then it will return back here again before moving on. Or?
Well, as I understand the process, effectively, if there are significant objections, it would come here. So I think if everyone was happy with the scheme, and it's unlikely, frankly, and there's something that is complicated, I think it's most likely it will come back here. But Richard might like to say.
Yeah, I think what we'd propose to do is we'd actually propose to just do an actual proper public engagement, as it were, prior to doing any advertisement of any traffic regulation order process. So we'll engage the public, engage with the councillors, and work with them to look at what the art of the possible is for the area, and then on the the delivery of the bus service improvement plan ultimately is delegated to our service director Wendy, and in consultation with Councillor Hadley. So if they were minded to, then we would go out to form some sort of decision, as it were, informed through TAG in cabinet, and then we would then. It would be informed through TAG potentially, depending on the views of what's being presented. But ultimately, then we would follow, after that public engagement and decision has been recorded, that traffic regulation order process. If there were then objections to that traffic regulation order process, it would then come back through Transportation Advisory Group on its way to cabinet, or potentially to get to this group and be withdrawn again.
I'm almost sorry I asked the question.
Basically, everybody that needs to be will be informed and consulted for their views before anything else proceeds. I think that's the message we're trying to convey, if that helps.
Yeah, it's fine. May I ask another daft question? From time to time, for reasons which is probably best not to dwell on, the service to Somerford gets disrupted. Has there been any analysis at all of any additional pressures that might put on the route through this particular part of the route?
So as part of this analysis into this section, we use a system called Analyze Bus Open Data, known as ABODS. Essentially, we look at the tracking of buses from one bus stop to another. So for the purposes of this scheme itself, we've focused purely on the time to travel from Purewell Cross roundabout through Purewell to the Stony Lane bus stop, which is on the other side of Stony Lane Crossroads. Not aware of any particular concerns that have been raised, but we are happy to take on any concerns that are raised by councillors on any aspects of the road, of the bus network, to look at in the future.
Okay, Councillor McCoy.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to make two things. You noted in your presentation a second ago that the parking outside the church would potentially be removed. That church is actually Christchurch Food Bank Plus. It's probably one of the most well-used food banks in the conurbation. So they often have people dropping off donations or people picking them up. And I think that's probably quite an important service that we probably don't want to remove parking from outside of. And I think that's probably 50% of the reason we got so many negative responses to possibly that consultation. So I think it's important when we do these schemes to really look into what we're doing before we make anything public in the future. And the second one is the parking a little bit further up. It's just outside the sandwich shop and the newsagent, and that sandwich shop is a regular. I visit it quite regularly, and it's it's usually it is people stopping in for 10 minutes to pick, mostly workmen and things, to stop to pick up sandwiches and things. And that parking, again, is quite well used. It's not people just putting cars there all day, every day, and causing. It's usually a lot of vehicle movements in and out of those parking spaces. I agree with what Councillor Trent says, that in this location there really isn't any off-street parking in terms of the houses themselves, and so this location would be particularly tricky for any scheme that comes forward because of that lack of parking within this area. So going forward, the main thing I really wanted to say is that before anything becomes public, we probably really need to think about making sure we've covered all our bases so we don't get a big negative review, because I felt like I took the brunt of that BCP proposal at the time, even though it's not actually in my ward. It's slightly just over the ward boundary. I think people are getting on in Summerford, which is my ward, and then really most of my residents use those things in Purewell, and I think that's why I probably got the majority of the phone calls and the emails and the residents shouting at me. So if we could go forwards, yeah, we just double check, make sure everything.
I think that's the key thing here. We've sort of analysed the consultation results, and obviously we're proposing that we go back to re-engage, and we want to work with the town council and ward councillors and everybody else to formulate a scheme that's acceptable for a lot of people.
Yes, just coming back onto that, and the same with Councillor Trent's points. Yeah, the initial recommendations propose the removal of the parking immediately outside the sandwich shop and the convenience store, to which the objections were raised, which is why the adjusted recommendation's been moved further down. As you say, it is quite a tricky section, so to speak, which is why we've tried to appease residents as best as possible with having no restrictions after 6 o'clock in the evening, so residents can park there overnight. And the same with on Sundays. There's no enforcement on that section on Sunday, so they can park there on Sundays. So those are generally the levels where traffic flow is lower, and buses aren't impeded as much. And again, as mentioned earlier, we've shared this with the bus operator, who is happy with the recommendations as well. Thank you.
Brilliant, thanks. I'll have a think about that whilst I'm sat on the bus this evening, because I'll be using that service later on.
Thank you. So the recommendation to, oh, sorry, Councillor Rice.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask that if there are changes when it comes back, for that to be sort of clearly documented here, so that we can see those changes and check that the service that you're suggesting is still going to be good enough in terms of a bus improvement. Like, just understand, well, basically just understand what the changes are. Like maybe something as simple as in the adjusted recommendations, sort of highlighting in different coloured writing which bits have actually changed, as opposed to, I find it quite difficult to see what actually has been adjusted. Just a comment, thank you. Oh, and a comment for the other, well, for both of these schemes, would it be possible for them to come back in a year's time just with an update of like how the bus changes have changed? So, for example, the Boscombe one, so that we can understand those changes.
We will do that, Councillor. Thank you very much.
Councillor Farr.
Yeah, just to add the comment here, Ray, that 900 plus signatures and 181 objections is quite a significant number of people who aren't happy with what was being proposed. So I just hope what changes will be made will obviously you can't please everybody, but obviously people like Simon need to be able to get to the bakers and obviously you need to. It's important to consider the small businesses. I think that sometimes that's the thing that irks people when it comes to these changes of whether it's, you know changing parking with cycle lanes or with the bus routes, this sort of thing. So it's important to remember those those small businesses that communities use, whether it's it's people who walk there or get the bus or drive. It's we need to consider them. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So the recommendation to Cabinet is that the revised scheme is engaged on with ward councillors, Christchurch Town Council and the community prior to being advertised by a TRA. I take it that we're all happy with that going forward. Thank you. Moving on to the next item, which is 9C, Safer Roads Fund, the 20 mile an hour Boston and Folkestone. Mr. Pincock.
That's fine. So we've got another officer just joining us now, Marie Bardsley, who's just sitting down. She's been the programme lead for our Safer Roads Fund, and she's just going to introduce the paper, which is settled.
There you go.
Thank you, everyone. Apologies for that. As Richard mentioned, my name's Marie Barnsley and I'm a highways project engineer for BCP Council, and I'm currently leading on the Safer Roads Fund, which includes the proposed extension of the 20-mile-an-hour zone in Boscombe. So as part of, for the agenda, I'll be talking through the project overview, giving an overview of the project, also talking about the previous project engagement, and also going through the traffic order for the 20-mile-an-hour zone extension and providing a summary of the consultation. Cool. Okay, so to give you an overview of the project stems from a nationwide study conducted by the Department of Transport and the Road Safety Foundation, which looked at collisions along A roads across the UK. As a result of that study, BCP Council was invited to apply for funding to improve safety along the A35 corridor, specifically between Iford Roundabout and St Paul's Roundabout. We were successful in our bid and were awarded 1.89 million for the Safer Roads Fund to carry out a range of safety improvements along this stretch of the A35. The map shows the collision data used in the TFD analysis covering the period from 2017 to 2021. In total, there are 165 collisions along this stretch of the road, resulting in 178 casualties. On screen, you'll see there's blue squares and green dots. The blue squares represent serious collisions and the green dots represents collisions with slight casualties. So, as part of the bid process for the funding, we were required to use a specialist software tool called IRAP, which was provided by the DFT and Road Safety Foundation for us to analyze sorry, apologies, possible road safety improvements along the route. The software looks at how likely a proposal is to reduce the severity of future collisions and also the cost effectiveness it would be. The map shown on the screen details the proposals agreed as part of the bid process, which includes the 20-mile-an-hour zone extension shown in light blue. The dark blue lines indicate the existing 20-mile-an-hour zones. These proposals were subject to a public consultation that took place back in March and April last year, which the feedback was shared with local ward councillors, portfolio holders and the public. More details of this can be found on Have Your Say website, and the link is included in your pack. So, following a review of the consultation feedback and after discussions with ward councillors, portfolio holders and Moorbus, we made some adjustments to the original 20-mile-an-hour zone extension proposal. Specifically, two sections were removed. The stretch in the middle, which is greyed out there, which is Centenary Way, that's been removed from the proposal. And previously, the zone was going all the way past Warnford Road Crossroads, and now that's been reduced to 1163 Christchurch Road, just past the parade of shops in the area. The remainder of the proposals are as shown on the previous slide. This revised proposal was subject to a formal traffic regulation order consultation, which ran from the 31st of January to the 28th of February this year. So this slide just lists their side roads that would fall within the 20-mile-an-hour limit, which are all residential roads. The TRO advertisement was as our standard process, which included on-site notices in the local press and online via the council's consultation platform, Have Your Say. So, in response to the TRO consultation, we received 56 responses, 16 in support, 37 objections, and the other 5 were general comments. I won't go through all the individual comments here, but within the slide, within your pack, you'll see a representative sample has been included. Also included in the pack are responses to the main themes of the objections, supported by evidence and data where available. This includes national research contradicting common concerns around the effectiveness of 20-mile-an-hour zones. There's quite a lot of comments, which, again, as I said, I won't go through. Right. To summarise, the scheme is funded by the Department of Transport through the Road Safety Fund. It's ring-fenced, designed to address high casualty rates on A roads. Along this stretch of the A35, there was 165 recorded collisions, 187 casualties. From the consultation, 28% of respondents supported the 20-mile-an-hour zone, and with particular strong support in areas near schools and high pedestrian areas. Some comments highlighted some safety concerns, including better enforcement, and some objections were raised, but it's important that many of these concerns are not supported by national evidence. Extensive research shows that 20-mile-an-hour limits improve safety, reduce the number and severity of collisions, and do not significantly impact traffic flow. And finally, the scheme supports active and sustainable travel. It also aligns with BCP Council's goals for climate action and sustainable travel. And that is the end of the slideshow.
Thank you. Members, do we have? Councillor Trent.
Yeah, I think it's a bit unfortunate that this consultation was taking place where there was a general election campaign going on, and it was being plucked out as a policy difference, and there'd all the controversy in Wales where they perhaps went over the top and did a blanket one, including some inappropriate ways. But having been on the edge of a 20-mile-an-hour zone for a long time and having bits of 20-mile-an-hour zone in my ward, but demands for a lot more, I don't actually see the sort of problems that were being communicated to me by residents. I had some quite sort of heavy bouts of correspondence with people and so on, and nearly everyone was quoting one sort of slightly oddball report saying that it wasn't reducing accidents, but actually it does reduce accidents, and particularly if there are physical measures as well, which unfortunately you can't afford in a lot of this, and the reductions in accidents are significant, and the speed reduction. There's always this issue about enforcement, and I get that quite regularly, and I always get that this system works, that system doesn't, unless they've got the other system, and then it's the other way round. But I do think it's something that we should proceed with where it's appropriate. I think sometimes you can stretch an area just a little bit further and it doesn't really sort of fit with what you're trying to achieve. But through the shopping area and by schools and so on, I think it's actually quite important to keep speed down. And there must be a lot of non-recorded accidents, minor accidents that involve pedestrians and things like that, trying to sort of navigate an area like that. So personally, I think there's everything to gain and not a lot to lose in this, because from a driver's point of view, when all this controversy was going on, I was observing the speed I was doing in normal motoring, not, deliberately slow motoring. And I actually realised, and this included driving through Cardiff a while back, but I actually realised, I'm not going more than 20 miles an hour anyway. There might be the odd person that will sort of go sort of mad and sort of overtake, but generally speaking, it's a normal speed to operate in some of these dense built up areas. So personally, I support this. And I'm glad that there have been some minor modifications responding to people's comments, because I do think that we've got to be careful not to get into a situation where it starts to apply in places that aren't really part of the problem, that we actually focus on the areas that need the 20-mile-an-hour limit. But as I say, I'm a full supporter of it, and I presented a list some 12 years ago, including several roads in my ward, of which we've delivered about 2, which, it's sort of, but it's something that people out there want, but unfortunately just got caught up in a lot of sort of tabloid stirring, and, people are worked up about it needlessly, I think.
Thank you. It's certainly an interesting experiment to drive at 20 miles an hour down Winton, which I've been trying to do with the current proposals in place, and it's doesn't seem to slow my journey down at all. It certainly seems to be quite smooth.
The other thing I've done, I've set one thing on my car to actually tell me the miles per gallon I'm doing with the driving that I'm doing at the moment, because it's one tiny little bit of advanced technology that seems to be in my bog standard car. And I was driving along, in fact, outside here at the 20-mile-an-hour zone. It was, I was using so little fuel, it was reading 999.9 miles per gallon, which was obviously ridiculous. But, you don't use that much. It's the stop-start and the aggressive driving, trying to get to the junction to be in the queue quicker seems to be the way that you end up using more fuel. But, so, I support the concept personally, and I think that as long as we apply it sympathetically and not, I think the blanket thing would cause problems, but if we apply it sympathetically and thoughtfully, then.
Councillor Rice.
Hello. Yeah, it just wasn't clear where all of the money is being spent. I suppose it's quite a significant amount of money, and so I wasn't sure whether we would, whether all of the sort of the changes to the side roads and the pedestrian crossings were included in that or not. Yeah. Right. Okay.
Sorry. Yeah, they were. Yeah, some of them have already been implemented already in Boscombe. From Folkestone Station going towards the precinct, we've already installed a number of side road entry treatments.
Using the money, money?
Yeah, from the Safer Roads Fund. And we've also installed a new toucan crossing up at St Swithin's roundabout.
Okay, so it may just be worth, because I think looking at the title, it just says it's a 20-mile-an-hour.
That's what we're here to discuss today. Yeah, previously we've done previous engagement a year ago, which went out to public consultation, and the ward councillors and Morbus and all stakeholders regarding the whole scheme as a whole, which you can find the consultation and their decision to go forward with online. And then this section here, what we're here to speak today about, is just about the 20-mile-an-hour zone that's gone through the recent TRO process.
Right. Okay. Thank you. I think it's really good. Really pleased to see it coming forwards. I wanted to raise in terms of legal litigation. I heard in a speech by Chris Boardman that it's now really important that local authorities are introducing 20-mile-an-hour schemes, because if we propose to and then don't, it has now been proven that it does reduce serious injuries and accidents, crashes, sorry, and therefore we have a responsibility to ensure that people are safe moving around. So I think, yeah, it's useful to be emphasising that this is our legal responsibility. On that note, no, sorry, separate to that, just looking at the in page 204 and 205, It's quite a lot there, which is good to see. There was a tiny comment on gender. There is likely to be an equal male-female split in the area. I assume that's the number of people that are male and number of people that are female. And it says that both males and females will be impacted equally. But then it goes on to say that they're not impacted equally. So it was just a very minor, but just to change that. And then later on, it goes on to say that there will be no impact on journey times. There's no evidence to say that there'll be no impact on journey times, but then a paragraph later, it suggests that maybe journey times will be longer. Where does it say? This could be offset by encouraging more people to use sustainable transport. So it just contradicts itself. So I just thought that that was useful to point out.
Any further comments? Councillor Farr.
I think Councillor Trent mentioned about the one of the things I'm going to mention now, the enforcement. How will it be enforced, and are there ongoing costs with what will be in place to enforce these 20-mile-an-hour speed limits?
Enforcement is down to Dorset Police and their partnership with the Dorset Road Safe Partnership. Our road safety team work very closely with them on all speeding matters across BCP. So I'm sure as the project leads in this, the road safety team will be liaising on this one when it gets installed to discuss potential for enforcement if required.
Second question, if I may. So I get about a lot on the buses. So when it comes to the evening, there's less people getting on and off the buses, so the buses tend to be a bit quicker. So I think the timetables kind of reflect that. So I'm just sort of wondering if this does affect the bus time. It's going to affect the bus timetable. If it's like, okay, it's clear here, not as many people getting on, but we've got to slow down a bit. Just wondering if. Thanks.
Please.
Thank you. Firstly, to say, as Marie said, we were consulted from the start. It's an area that I know very well because I walk along there, drive buses along there, and dare I even admit occasionally drive my car along there. It doesn't get out very often, but sometimes it does. We took the view that actually that we rarely exceed 20 miles an hour along the section of Christchurch Road affected. The bits we were initially concerned about are the two bits that Marie mentioned were removed, which were Centenary Way and the eastern section of Christchurch Road towards Iford. But the bit concerned, quite frankly, some of the pedestrian behaviour along there is the reason why we drive slower than we might otherwise. So no objections from us. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Canavan.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I suppose I should declare an interest, shouldn't I, as a councillor in Boscombe West? And but I don't suppose the team get thanked very often for consulting ward councillors. So I would like to thank you and the team for consulting with the ward councillors in Boscombe. It feels like it's been going on for a very long time, but we're here. One of the important things I think about this issue of enforcement is that it's not so much about the the legalities and the kind of physical enforcement. Primarily, in my view, what we've been trying to achieve here is to change people's behaviour, change the way in which people drive, and get used to the fact that they have to drive slower. I mean, I have a wager anyway, like nobody can drive more than 20 miles an hour in Boscombe anyway. But that's not really the point. It's about trying to ensure that people are aware that they have to drive more slowly, and being, I'm the least patient person in the world, but you have to be more patient, and I think that's one of the reasons when we were looking at more physical obstacles to being able to drive more quickly, and talking about the cost. It was more about that, trying to achieve that change in behaviour really by those physical barriers. But if we can do it another way, then let's try and do it another way. But I absolutely support this, Chair, so thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor McCormack.
Thank you, Chair. On the summary on page 224, it states that the A35 corridor recorded 165 collisions and 187 casualties between 2017 and 2021. Because this proposal is solely looking at the speed of a vehicle from 30 miles an hour to 20 miles an hour, in the future, when we come back to assess how effective this has been, are we removing from that 165 collisions and 178 casualties the data that includes where speed was not the factor, for example, drink driving, somebody significantly going over the current 30-mile-an-hour speed limit, so that we can measure the actual effectiveness of dropping from 30 to 20 rather than having all this other mixed up data also in that?
We can do that. It is possible. Yeah, it's more time consuming, but it is possible. But even without going down to the nitty gritty of the collisions, you generally find that it will decrease anyway. And definitely the seriousness of the collisions from serious to slight will definitely decrease, no matter on what the reason for the collision.
I understand that, but I feel like
Yeah.
we probably do need to get down to that nitty gritty in the future, because if somebody's drink driving, it's irrelevant.
Yeah, or someone has a heart attack.
Yeah.
Councillor Rice.
Can you just go over the changes to the east of the A35 section, which bit has been removed?
Yeah, absolutely.
So I didn't fully understand why that had been changed from being suggested as 20 miles an hour initially and then changed to 30 miles an hour.
Yes, originally it was going past the parade of the shops down, past Folkestone, past Harewood Avenue, and you've got some more shops, and then you've got a residential bit, and then some little shops, and Wantford Road crossroads. Speed does pick up naturally in that area. So without putting enforcement in, it would also be harder for people are not likely to stick to the 20 mile an hour. It's found, without putting like speed cushions or other forms of enforcement. And also it's to do with journey times for public transport as well, because that's why they pick up their speed if they're falling behind generally. So we decided that it was probably better to reduce it in that area, because people are not likely to stick to the 20 mile an hour speed anyway. And also it would have an impact on journey time for buses.
Yeah, just to add to that, when the extent was reviewed, it was also the number of collisions in that section were reviewed as well. They weren't found to be the same cluster and density of collisions in that section. So when people obviously fed their feedback through the initial public engagement, there wasn't very much justification for actually doing that full extent. So that's in part behind the decision for pairing it back, or the main reason. If we as an authority felt that people were still going to get killed and seriously injured, and the 20 mile an hour limit would have had a significant impact on that in that particular section, then we would obviously have pushed to retain it. But obviously, in light of the comments from our enhanced bus partners and actually reviewing the accident data, the collision data in that area, there wasn't a case for, in our view, for retaining that short section between Iford roundabout and the Warnford crossroads.
So I suppose I'd be interested to see the local walking and cycling infrastructure plan, and whether that's on this, like whether there's a strategic section on this part, and whether the up-to-date guidance is whether you should be having cycle infrastructure next to 30 miles an hour when we've got the option to have it 20 miles an hour. Just looking on the Google Maps now, it's just a painted white line for cycle infrastructure at the moment, but it seems to be single carriageway either way and residential. So I would be interested to know the propensity for cycling around there, the propensity for walking around there, and how much we're putting off by allowing vehicles to go. I can understand the buses like going faster, but any of the other reasons for increasing the speed limit from 20 miles an hour to 30 miles an hour, I'm a bit worried about that aspect of it.
It's okay. So obviously the limit currently is 30 miles an hour. So it's actually currently 30. So the proposal is to reduce it to 20. So it's not currently 20. It never has been 20, just to be absolutely clear for transparency. And obviously this is part of a whole package of improvements of the 1.89 million that, you know, from Bournemouth train station for one effect all the way along the entire A35 corridor to IFOD, to treat, in light of the, you know, IRAP work that was done, the technical work initially, a whole series of interventions. One of the things that was highlighted was the potential for putting in a 20-mile-an-hour speed limit because of the impact that it could have on reducing the number of casualties along that route. The proposed original extent was obviously further on to the east, beyond the Warnford junction. However, in light of the feedback and actually reviewing feedback from the public and the public engagement that was undertaken last year, and in light of feedback from the statutory consultees, including the bus operators, a decision was made to reduce the extent of that. What we're here today to discuss is the consultation feedback from the formal TRO advert. So the only reason this item's here at Transportation Advisory Group today en route to Cabinet is because there's been some objections to the implementation of the 20-mile-an-hour speed limit as a result of the TRO process. By all means, more than happy to, you know, work with you outside of this meeting and look at that section. And I think Beth was back in the room a minute ago, she's gone again now, to look at the local cycling walking infrastructure plan and what we can do en route, and obviously through IFOD. We're actually looking at that area generally as part of wider planning and local cycling walking infrastructure plan in any instance. I hope that helps just provide the context. I'm just trying to provide the background as to why it's not, almost, dare I say it, a more, how can I describe it, a more open debate at this stage, because it's already been through Cabinet, it's already been through the decision-making process, and now we're at the kind of last phase, as Councillor Cabinet referred to, as it's been going on for a while. This one, I think, was your quote earlier, because we've been through the traffic regulation order advert process now. So this is a, do you, as an advisory group, want to amend what's been recommended to Cabinet or not?
Yeah, that's useful for the context. I suppose in view of that, I would like to just investigate that a little bit further. Having sort of said what I said earlier about Chris Boardman saying the legal responsibilities that we have as a local authority, if there is an accident, as if there is a crash with a serious injury on that section of the road, and we have decided not to implement 20 miles an hour when we could have done, it's not the bus company's responsibility, it's our responsibility. So I just I suppose I'm thinking of this as an opportunity that I've seen this. I want to just check that we're not making a mistake here. I realise that it's not part of our decision, but maybe as TAG we could recommend that we review that small aspect of a decision that was made previously as a sort of an add-on aspect.
Can I just, yeah, we have looked at that section in a bit more detail since the initial consultation, and we've done some speed checks down there, and basically it's above the recommended average speed for putting in a 20 mile an hour without physical enforcement. So that was another reason why we decided to reduce that area, going on national guidance for implementing 20 miles an hour zones or limits. Yeah, so that kind of, yeah, we could go ahead and put the 20 mile an hour, we could extend it down there, but it's unlikely to be abide without putting physical enforcement in. And that's, yeah, that would be another step.
Yes, I understand that. I suppose my counter argument to that would be about technological advances in cars in terms of being speed limited to if there's a 20 mile an hour introduced in an area, then the car is not allowed to go faster than 20 miles an hour. I realise it's not in place at the moment, but if that was to happen within the next 5, 6, 7 years, I just think that physical like being able to enforce it is not a good enough reason for me to think about changing it, because it's about cultural shift in there are people living along this road.
Yeah, it's just going on the guidance from our design guidance of when we should and shouldn't put in 20 mile an hour.
Does it automatically exclude being able to put it in if you
No,
can't?
it doesn't automatically, but it's guidance. Yeah.
Councillor Hadley.
Thank you. It was just a technical question, really. The map that showed the casualties was 2017 to 2021. And I was interested because I had a look sort of before and after that. And beforehand, there were quite a cluster of fatalities on the western section, so sort of to the west at Boscombe Chine Gardens. And one in 2023 at the junction of Crabton Close, so to the east of the pedestrian period. And one much earlier, actually, in the area that Councillor Rice was just talking about, Copthorne Road, I think it was, which was outside of where we're now proposing for 20 mile an hour zone. So I was kind of interested whether that was the figure of analysis that the Department for Transport took, or whether it was the 5 years that we took, and why it wasn't more recent if it was the 5 years we took.
It was based on the basically the 2017 to 2021 was when the DFT did their initial analysis and asked, and that was what the IRAP model was based on in terms of obtaining the funding. So it took quite a long process to obtain.
Councillor Trent.
Yeah, just one other thought to throw into the mix when it comes to actually planning the implementation, and it's based on experience of areas where we've had 20 mile an hour zones, or we've had speed drifting too far the other way issues. What has been very effective in the past, and it certainly was used in the Heatherland, Newtown and Heatherlands 20 mile an hour zone, is paint. A couple of roads in that area had little mini roundabouts painted at the junctions and things like that, and that was actually quite effective. It doesn't stop everyone from going over the speed, but it's cheap and cheerful compared to putting in physical measures. And there have been issues in the past where vehicles have been slowed down quite significantly by just painting hatched markings and things like that, and just giving an impression that the road is narrower than it is. And hopefully when the details looked at how to sort of dress all of this, especially at the fringes where the speed's beginning to sort of be more naturally closer to 30, that actually using a tin of paint and appropriate markings could actually be a way of handling that transition, and it does seem to work. I'm always amazed by it, but actually I observe it. If you've got some hatch markings, you slow down. It's just one of these weird things in our psyche that so just really saying a point to be considered.
Have these aspects been considered?
Yes, they certainly have. Working with the design team, yes, they have. So Richard's.
I was going to say I was part of the team that put in those improvements back in Rosemary Road and etc. back in Poole when we did that. Back in there, it's a totally different environment now. I would state this is obviously the main route through Boscombe and Southbourne, and the A35 basically to Christchurch. Where obviously we were in more residential streets where we were experiencing rat running in those other sort of areas in terms of Rosemary Road. I totally agree though. You can use different ways, and there are. For example, this actual stretch that we're looking at the moment used to have a centre line that was removed when the route was resurfaced between Folkestone and Iford roundabout, and the cycle lanes were put in. So there's all different things that we can do. So I don't disagree with what Councillor Trent's saying in terms of the using different methods and even removing markings or putting more paint down sometimes, and reinforcing speed limits with roundels, etc. But it's a slightly different context where we are in terms of the network. And I think along the route between Folkestone and IFOD, if you weren't careful, you'd be giving almost sort of a priority to certain routes and then actually disrupting the bus journeys east-west along the main
But
corridors.
on, just really following that up, on main roads, the first thing that I really noticed it as an effective tool was Herbert Avenue. And it was just to slow things down a little bit, and it worked. So it is quite an effective tool that you can use on the main roads if you use it thoughtfully. And it's a downside cheaper than putting a physical measure in.
Thank you for that. Any further?
I've just got
Councillor Mackay.
Just got one question. When we consider these TROs, do we look at the potential of road users using alternative routes? Because there's people out there, and I'm not going to lie, I'm one of them, that would get frustrated with a 20-mile-an-hour route, and I would probably think, well, I'll go a different route then. So you might end up finding that some, or in my view, quite a few road users will now say, well, I'm not going to use that road, I'm going to go use a different road somewhere else, a different route. Do we look at that in the long term?
Yeah, that was one of their comments that Councillor Hadley raised initially when we were looking at putting in the 20-mile-an-hour zone in the initial consultation, and that's why we expanded the area to include all the side roads between Folkestone train station and Folkestone rail station bridge, and that triangle area that was on the map shown earlier, to stop the potential of people running through that area. So it was all 20.
I'll just come in and add to that. We've put in obviously tens and tens of, I don't know how many, there's an exact number in a report that was taken to Cabinet and Council last year, I think about 60 or 70 zones or areas we put in across BCP, and we've not had any evidence or when we've reviewed them of people diverting around them. People have just stuck to the route. So if we do ever experience it, then, you know, obviously we'll seek to address it. But observing them, the first sort of 5 that we put in, this is in Poole originally, we had no diverting traffic around it when it was monitored. So we're fairly confident that there's been no diversion around these routes. You're more likely to find that when you're putting in physical measures, but not just the speed limit.
Okay, I'm more thinking of like the long term over 10, 15, 20 years. And I can give you an example, is that in Burton, the roads that go between Salisbury Road and Stony Lane, most of them are 20-mile-an-hour roads. So naturally, the one road, which isn't a 20-mile-an-hour road, it's a 30-mile-an-hour road, which is Martins Hill Lane, has now become the main thorough route between Stony Lane and Salisbury Road. But that didn't happen overnight. That happened over 10, 15, 20 years. Because people then started thinking, well, I'm not going to drive down the other routes because they're 20-mile-an-hour roads. So I'm just conscious that, is this going to happen here? But if you say, like you said, looking at the map, there isn't any other way around it, then those people might suddenly think, well, actually, I'm not going to go to the Sovereign Centre because I can't be bothered to drive down all these 20-mile-an-hour roads, and they might disappear off somewhere else, which then further doesn't help Boscombe in any way because it's already struggling to get people into their high street and paying for things. So this is 20-mile-an-hour idea. Although I understand the safety aspects around it, I really don't think it helps certain areas in any way grow and overcome some of the deprivation problems like they've got in Boscombe.
Councillor Rice, are you indicating?
Well, I'm still wanting a bit of help, I suppose, with understanding whether there can be any further discussion outside of the TAG meeting regarding the TRO for 20 miles an hour for the eastern aspect of the A35 that has been removed.
I think the problem there is that obviously we've advertised the traffic regulation order under the Road Traffic Regulation Act, and as in the current format, and to add additional would then go us back to the drawing board and have to advertise again. And I think that's the point that Richard was making. The scheme that we advertised came through the public engagement and public consultation prior to any traffic regulation orders, and also discussions with Marie, with the councillors, ward councillors, bus companies, everybody else. So we'd get ourselves in a sort of situation where we'd have to re-advertise certain bits if that was the case.
Councillor Herod, is yours.
I just want to kind of come back on the economic impact concerns that actually a lot of the cities that are often raised with me and held in high regard, and I'm told the great and the good have significant swathes of 20-mile-an-hour zones. So there's not evidence out there in the UK to suggest that that's such a significant impact. I kind of do, I hear you, but I just, there's not any evidence that I've seen that that backs that up.
Well, that evidence comes from a city, and we're not a city. We're a coastal town, 3 coastal towns. So that evidence is non-comparable because people within inner cities tend to use other forms of transport, so that the demographics are different and the way that people transport themselves around those areas are different. So it's not really relevant.
I realise I've been caught in the city trap of referring to the extent of the conurbation of being kind of at 400,000. That's a significant amount of people in an urban area on the coast. So I think some of the challenges are comparable. But yeah, I think we'll have to agree to disagree on that one.
Mr. Pincroft.
Just to say to Councillor Rice, yes, happy to look at 20-mile-an-hour TRO beyond that area, but it would obviously be through our minor transport schemes guidance process.
Yeah, the first step is, yeah, that would be good to have a discussion about it outside of the meeting and check whether it needs to come back as a scheme. And it is particularly interesting given Andy's point about the casualty data. I assume you were saying that there was some on that section. I didn't know the roads that you were talking about, so I didn't know.
Chair, yes, it was some time ago, 2009. So the question might be the roads changed anyway since then. Yeah. So I think, but as the officers have said, effectively because we've advertised what we've advertised, we can't really extend it without going through a process again. So it becomes a separate scheme to consider, really.
Can I just say, sorry, we will be putting in VAS signs in that area that you're. VAS signs, they're automatic signs with their, if you're doing the correct speed, you get a smiley face, and if you're not, they're miserable face. And we are looking at widening a couple of the traffic islands there. So hopefully that will have an impact as well. Even though we're not reducing the speed in that area, we are going to be making some changes to improve safety.
Okay, thank you. The recommendation going to Cabinet is that they the 20-mile-an-hour scheme is implemented as proposed. We're happy to recommend that recommendation to Cabinet with no changes. Yeah. Okay, thank you. So the next item 10 is the forward plan, and I shall hand over to Richard Pincroft to lead on that.
So, I mean, at the moment, to be quite honest with you, we don't have any other order of business on forward plan at the present, as far as I'm aware. Has been raised, obviously, as any matters are raised through or deferred back from Cabinet or Council to the group, we'll obviously host a meeting and prepare agenda papers for that. I've discussed before this meeting commenced with the traffic team leader, Andy Brown, because obviously the Transportation Advisory Group is a forum where we discuss any traffic regulation orders that are significantly or considered contentiously objected to. There aren't any at the moment that are in that category, so we don't have anything on our forward plan at present as a result of that.
Okay, thank you. Councillor McCormack.
Sorry, I just thought of this as we would just now. So I just thought, well, as part of the forward plan, would we be able to look at speed indicator devices? Because I know that there's a number around the BCP area that are in situ but not working, and I think it would be good for the group to see a report on them. I've got one in my ward actually that's been broken for 5 years and just hasn't worked. So it'd be nice to get a report on how many we've got across the conurbation, how many of them are working, how many are not working. What would it take to bring them back into a serviceable use? And if so, can we try and squeeze some money out of council to perhaps
I
get them
can
working?
endeavour to answer that. We work closely with the road safety team who manage the speed indicator devices, and I know that they have been looking at all of them across BCP, because there are a number that have been vandalised, a number that are very old over the years, and they're formulating a programme to assess and mend or introduce new ones, etc. And with better technology as well, and things are much better than they were 10, 15 years ago when some of these were put in your ward. So they are looking at that, and I'll feed that back to the road safety team leader.
Okay, brilliant. And the other thing that I thought perhaps we could look at, but I'm not sure whether it is a council function or whether it's a police function, but the use of ANPR cameras, because the use of them around the conurbation, especially for policing, it seems, what's the word? Some areas have loads of them and some areas have none of them at all. And you look at places like Bridport, for example, that are completely surrounded by ANPR cameras. And I'm just wondering whether we could have a report about how many there are. Probably not where they are, because I'm sure that's probably not information that wants to be public. But I'm not sure whether it quite fits into this group or not. No. I was wondering
I was
that,
just going to say,
because I've been trying to figure out where it fits in and what.
I would imagine that's more of a question for the police, to be honest with you, or perhaps if we don't have those cameras on our network.
Interesting, because the response I got from the police was that it was a council issue.
Well, it might be that it's, maybe you're thinking that there is another potential, is that it could be on the National Highways network, which is obviously Highways England. You know, what was Highways England is now National Highways. If you think about the A31 or the, but certainly across BCP we don't use any ANPR.
Okay, that's interesting. All right, I'll do some more research into that and come back to you.
Councillor Rice,
Yes, I was just wondering, with regards to the BCP funding and thinking ahead to applying for funding for next year, whether we could have an item that is looking at building up a proposal for school children to be able to get a dramatically reduced price ticket during the school week, so that we can have an ambitious application for next year. John Johnston. Is that something we could bring back here?
I think some of these items would be really good for scrutiny panel rather than an advisory group. I think that would be a really good place to put that into environment and place, and ask about how that travel is impacted rather than doing it through the advisory group. That would be my thought on it. But we have a scrutiny expert in the corner there who might be able to help us.
So we've obviously at the last meeting just the group considered the BCP, what we're calling BCP 2 programme, if you like, or the allocation for 25-26. It's not clear from central government yet what the allocation will be for 26-27. Obviously, it's quite a lot of. I'm not anti looking into what we can do to promote sustainable travel for young people, and we can take that away and we can look at that anyway. But in terms of formalising something for the next year's submission to the BCP, we don't know from the DFT what award we're going to get for the BCP in the following financial year. So it's quite a difficult thing to kind of follow through without that knowledge. Furthermore, the team actually got quite a large workload ahead of them this year, because as part of that BCP approval that went through Cabinet and Council, having been through TAG, we're just about to, in the coming months, launch a review of all the subsidised bus services pan BCP, and we don't know what the outcome of that could be on either the council's contribution to funding those services or what allocation of future years BCP allocation might be needed to help fund and maintain our local services. So I think that may be potentially considered a sort of higher priority for the team at the moment, but equally we do understand the importance, and perhaps what you're referring to might be better addressed through the local transport plan for development as well, and how we can effectively seek out ways of funding that. I mean, I'm quite happy to take away an action to explore with more bus you know, what the cost of actually providing lower cost transport solutions would be with them. Obviously, they're sat in the room, but I understand it would be in the millions. And obviously, our BCP allocation isn't going to be sufficient to cover that. And we've got many other asks on our BCP funds already. So.
Go ahead, Councillor Rice.
I suppose it's a general sort of how are we councillors going to scrutinise the plans that the council have to transform these 50% of journeys of everybody switching away from private car use to more sustainable forms of transport. So it's, yeah, just one part. I suppose that suggestion is one part of a bigger project that I'm not sure that we have got anywhere in the council that's looking at it at the moment, particularly. Like, are we actually keeping to this target that we have of 50% of journeys being switched? I just feel it's not being monitored.
Do any of the members of the Cabinet here want to say anything about that?
Well, the ambition is there. It's a good challenge. It's one that probably is for scrutiny rather than for tag, I suspect, because it is something that we could produce a paper on. There's obviously traffic monitoring figures and some of the methods for around, particularly the new infrastructure we're putting in. We are looking at monitoring that, but in terms of the total journeys, we don't. I haven't seen the figures as yet, but it's something we could certainly ask for. I've seen Richard put his hand up.
That's fine. So it seems as if most of it's for scrutiny, rather than like tag is for design things that have already been designed and need sort of more technical scrutiny. Thinking.
Well, I just come back and say we've got a cross-party working group that's developing a new local transport plan. That local transport plan will have attached to it an implementation plan to deliver the council's vision for transport. And at the moment, the council motion from November 2022 is to have 50% of journeys pan BCP by walking, cycling, wheeling, or sustainable transport by 2030. So that's our aspiration. That is, the objective of the local transport plan that's currently in development. And there is a cross-party working group that's been set up to obviously oversee that, and that in due course will go out to public consultation, and it will, then come back through cabinet and through the democratic process, and obviously through Transportation Advisory Group and any overview and scrutinies, etc., that it needs to go through on the way to do that. There's obviously another work stream led by environment, or it might not be environment now, apologies, but where they've got the climate mitigation action plan, and again, we've been feeding into that work stream recently, having been consulted by colleagues that are leading on that, Neil Short. So yeah, there's lots of work going on. I'm just trying to work out how best to consider what you're asking. But I think a lot of the things that you're raising are covered by the work streams that are ongoing and will go through committees, to be honest.
Thank you. Councillor Trent, did you still want to have something?
Well, I'll cut it short because I think we've gone an hour beyond the scheduled duration of this, but we mentioned about speed indicator devices, and I do find some of them behaving very randomly. There's one that tells you you're sort of, you're going too fast when you're practically walking, sort of thing. But the one thing that I get questions about is enforcement, and I know it involves the police, but I wonder whether us or a more appropriate committee could actually have a meeting, and I think the Transport Advisory Group would be quite a good forum, with the police on enforcement and where speed cameras are and where they're not. I've got some residents saying, oh, I've heard they're going to take that speed camera away on Ringwood Road. I don't know whether that's true or not. I'm waiting for the work to finish, but I know that one disappeared from Herbert Avenue, which seemed to be in a good place because we've had a couple of accidents near where it used to be, sort of thing. And you know, it's having a better understanding of how that system works and how enforcement can be improved and how we can let the way enforcement works inform our thoughts on contentious proposals. You know, I think the 20-mile-an-hour zone was quite a good example of where, you know, understanding what will be enforced and what won't be enforced, you know, is there. And I'm dealing with the resident at the moment, and I've sort of said, well, I'll take it up with the neighbourhood police team, but what you really want, because I got a feeling that the answer is going to be not what they expect it to be, that they do a community speed watch. Because quite often when people have done the community speed watch, what they perceived as speeding vehicles were actually just vehicles that just turned a corner and revving up and so on, you know, sort of. But I think that whole gamut, that whole scene is something that I think would be a very useful discussion for TAG to have, especially when we look at some of the contentious items that come forward. And I think the better we understand what we can and can't do, I think the better decision making, or well, the better decision advice we can give.
Mr. Pincroft.
Yeah, so we have a Dorset Strategic Road Safety Partnership with the police, and there's regular meetings with them, and we can raise those items with the police at that partnership meeting. I would just sort of, I've obviously not been asked by yourself, or I'm not sure if you've asked any of our officers about the speed camera on Ringwood Road. If you wanted to, we're happy to take that way and actually find out for you what's happening with that speed camera. Obviously, it is the police that would operate it, and you know, many of them were sort of wet film cameras that they have chosen not to renew and update. But nowadays they're doing more mobile patrols. So they have a van which they'll come along, they'll set up, and then they'll actually try and, you know, as I say, enforce the limit in that manner.
Well,
happy to take any local ward queries that you've got away and address that with the road safety team. Not.
Well, you could ask about it. I was sitting on it because the whole road's going to be closed for the cycleway installation and things like that. So it's not of immediate concern. But when that work's being done, the future of that speed camera, which is in quite an important position, you've got sort of pedestrian crossings either side of it. You've got, you know, nursing homes and so on. And, you know, I would be concerned if there was a proposal to take it out. I think it's a rumour that is not founded, but it's the one on Ringwood Road, fairly close to Broome Road.
Yeah, happy to take that away.
Yeah.
So up from Alderney. Yeah. No problem.
Okay. Thank you. Before I close the meeting, just like to say thank you to all the many officers we've used your time up this afternoon with. Thank you very much for presenting your reports, and to Moorbus for your attendance. Thank you, members. Meeting closed.